Hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by Sproutword.com. I'm Vinay Koshy and our guest today is Timme. Stephen, you are the founder and president of FinListics, which from my understanding is a B2B sales leadership company that promotes insight-led selling. From what I'm able to gather, you really help sales professionals in the B2B space really better their approach to selling to a C-suite. And what started off from what I would call fairly humble beginnings is now pretty large, and that you operate in about 32 countries. You must be doing something right. I'd love to dive into a bit of the background. So from what I understand, you started off as a professor teaching finance at Georgia State, and from there got into consulting gigs. And is that correct?
That's correct. First of all, Vinay, thank you for having me on the podcast. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. But yeah, so Vinay, that's what happened. I started out as a college professor, had my PhD in finance. I love teaching. It runs in our family. So I consider it a gift. But when I became a professor, I decided I was not going to take a vow of poverty because at that time, professors didn't get paid that much, but we were able to consult. And so I was very fortunate to consult for a number of the Fortune 500 companies. And what I help them with is working with a lot of their folks, say in operations, to say, okay, Vinay, if you could improve yield on this paper machine 1%, how much would be worth? If you could take one day out of inventory, how much would be worth? So was always helping them convert their ideas into value. And just by pure luck, I was teaching an open enrollment workshop at Georgia Tech, or Georgia Institute of Technology here in Atlanta, where I live. And it was about operations and performance improvement and cash flow benefit. And this one guy from a software company came up to me and said, have you ever used this in sales? And so we started talking, and I had this epiphany. So if this is how their customers make decisions, they come with goals, strategies, they make decisions, what's the financial benefit? If you're an enterprise seller, why wouldn't you do the same thing to really better show the value of your solution? So that's when that became more and more successful. I left academic in 1992 to really start FinListics and really focus more on the sales side. And it was a tough one because I was tenured, but so that's like most things, it's luck and your ability to take advantage of it. And that's when, we really started focusing on helping enterprise sellers say, here's how you can be more relevant to those executive buyers, because most of them, in fact, a recent study says that 80% of enterprise or executive buyers think that sellers don't understand their business. So that's what we do. We want people to better understand their customers' business and be more relevant.
So now it's been a few years since 1992. So would you say that?
And I've got the gray hair to prove it.
Would you say that the problems that enterprise sellers are facing has changed somewhat, or they still are the fundamentals still the same?
The fundamentals are still the same in terms of most sellers just do not understand their customer's business. But if you look over the last 5 years or so, the buying groups, everyone's talking about digital transformation as an example, Vinay. I think Gartner says the average buying group now has 10 plus stakeholders. So now instead of me just selling to the CIO, or let's say I'm a UPS, I'm selling to the VP of supply chain, I've now got all these constituents, stakeholders that I have to make my solution be more relevant. I like the example of omni-channel. A lot of retailers are saying, we want to grow revenues by having a differentiated omni-channel experience. Think about who's involved. Marketing's involved, merchandising involved, distribution, logistics involved. You've got brick and mortar store operations involved, all aligned with the same goal, but pursuing different strategies, and they have different KPIs. So that now means that these enterprise sellers, I cannot just speak the language of IT as an example. I've got to learn how to talk to marketing. The other thing that's happening is these buying groups are much, much further down the buying journey before they even want to talk to a seller. And especially in this virtual environment, I can't come in, hey, Vinay, is that a picture of your kids? And did you catch that fish? I got to get to it and say, Vinay, here, I understand this to be your goals and strategies. Here's how we've helped others. and very quickly show how your solutions align with what they're trying to get done, and much, much earlier, give them some insights to the financial benefits. So the fundamental issue is there, knowing your customer, showing how your benefits help, but it's become a lot more complex. And that's why you just need to know what's going on and know it by the different lines of businesses.
I would certainly agree with you on that one. And I'd love to dive into this a bit more, but I'm also curious, you've had quite a journey to date. So what would you say is your personal area of strength?
I would say that's really anticipating what our customers need, because our journey was sort of like, okay, come in, teach these sellers finance, which most people were terrified of. In fact, if you said, hey, Vinay, you want to learn some finance or shove bamboo shoots up your fingernails, people grab the bamboo shoots every time. So it went through this evolution of, okay, teach these sellers finance. Don't make them MBAs in finance. Buyers expect them to know it. And then you could see where people say, oh, okay, I understand what cost of goods sold is. What is it we do to help that? So in anticipation of that, we started breaking the metrics down, saying, here's what underlies that financial metrics, and then working with them to say, oh, and by the way, here's how your solutions help them implement initiatives that impact these KPIs, operational KPIs, that drives his performance. Okay. And then the next part where they're saying, you say all the time, Stephen, if you only have an hour prepare, go learn their goals and strategies. How do we do that? And so we started working on, how do you very easily get those goals and strategies? How do you align your solutions? Those type of things. And now we're finding more and more people want soup to nuts solutions, anywhere from this person has their MBA in finance, so let's just talk about a solution mapping. This person was a psychology major, can he manage their personal finance? So it's really been an evolution. So I think one of my strengths is I'm so blessed to work with so many customers. I still get to work with a lot of buying execs that I can say, okay, here's where I think this is going. Let's see if that's going to work. How much value does that bring?
Well, that's a particularly unique insight. But would you say that in that area of strength, there's something else that businesses should know but don't?
Meaning what, Vinay? Help me out with that one.
Just from the approach, I think most people would understand that they need to bring value and a degree of unique insight to what they're sharing. That, however, can take many forms and shapes.
Right.
But would you say in their approach that there's something that they're missing or tripping over and don't quite realize?
Yes. And that would be, I know this is so simple, know your customer. It's absolutely amazing how many people do not really know their customers. In fact, I was talking to an acquaintance of mine, Mike Buggio, a former managing director at IBM. And I was talking about, how did you get your sellers to become more customer centric? And he said, he would tell them, look, before we even start talking about all the wonderful things IBM can do and talk about it on the quarterly business review, how close are you to doing this and that? He said it was all about, okay, Vinay has a goal of improving profit margin X%. That's what he said for 2022. How close is he to doing that? And I loved his approach. Start with what the customer wants, what kind of progress they're making, and then we can talk about what we want to do. And we're a private company, so it's harder to get our goals and strategies. But I get totally frustrated with vendors that start talking about what they can do before they even know what I'm trying to get accomplished. We can improve your profitability. Guess what? Right now, I want to have a good profitability. I want to double sales over the next, couple of years. How are you going to help me do that? Don't tell me how to manage my costs. So it's really becoming very customer centric. And I got to tell you, the feedback that we get from buying execs and even sales leaders and sales enablement is just not there for the most part. I'd say, I'm just swagging it, but I'd say there's about 25 of enterprise selling organizations that get it. And the other 75 or so, they're just still feature function, folk. And we got stats to prove that, by the way. We did a survey and we asked, how many of you consider yourselves trusted advisor, being able to help customers with goals, those type of things, strategic partner? 25% said yes. 50% or so said, even when we know their goals, we don't know how to align it to what we do. And the other, maybe 25%, whatever that number is, said they're still promoting feature function. So it sounds simple. Get to know the customer. They really want to get to know you.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious though, I'm finding it, and I'm sure listeners would find it a little bit difficult to imagine being able to come outright and ask questions about goals and financial metrics straight up. So first off, how do you capture data? And
Right.
is there a method of being able to elicit some of that information from your prospects as well?
Yeah, publicly traded companies, all the ones that I know of for the most part, will say, here's what our goals are for the year, right? We're going through digital transformation, or we're trying to go to new markets, or we're trying to do those things. And then maybe about 50% big picture goals will say, and for example, a consumer products company, I'm not going to mention it, but they have a goal of expanding their profit margin. I think it's like they're at 15% now, and they want to go to 20%. So immediately, I know what they're up to. And then the strategies, we'll talk about strategies, and how we're going to do that is through automation, or how we're going to do that is through customer insights. That stuff's out there in the public domain. So what I tell people to do all the time, again, if it's publicly traded, just start off by reading the letter to shareholders in their annual report. And there's all kinds of good information. I think it was Vodafone we were looking at. They laid everything out. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's our strategy. So at least start with that, and then vet it. When I meet you, Vinay, I say, hey, I understand this to be your goals. Is that still on the table? If something happens? Great conversation starter. And in our book, Insight-Led Selling, we were very fortunate to interview a lot of execs, buying execs. And they said, if it's out there in the public domain, you need to know it, whether it's our goals, or just read the letter to the shareholder, or look at my annual report and see what we're talking about. For example, the one consumer products company, they say, okay, our sales grew, I forget what it's 10% this year. And 5% of that came from selling more products. X% came through increased prices. So it's all out there. And a lot of that information, those annual reports, or even investor presentations, that's another great source as you're getting through the year. The annual report that came out in March may or may not be relevant. Look for their investor presentation. It's all on their websites. And if you want to ignore all the financial stuff, all the details the CFO gets into, fine. Look for the goals and strategies. So it's all out there, and it takes some work. There's no question about it. But I tell people it's like a relationship, right? I mean, if you're serious about someone, don't you really want to get to know their beliefs and their values and what they? I think a relationship with a customer is no different.
What about smaller companies where such information wouldn't necessarily be available in the public domain?
Yeah, we get asked that question all the time. Hey, Stephen, that's great for publicly traded. Here's what you do for a private company. What you can do is pick, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 companies in that industry. What are they up to? How are they doing financially? Are their revenues going up? Their revenues going down? So I can come to you, Vinay, and say, okay, look, normally I would prepare for this meeting by finding your goals and strategies. How are you doing financially? But you're private, so I didn't get to do that. What I find in your industry is one of the more common goals right now is developing greater customer insights to help grow revenues. Is that the kind of goal you're focused on? I find that people are implementing automation to leverage labor, productivity. Is that so? Actually, I've seen that your profit margins in your industries have dropped. Have you seen a similar thing? So here's the feedback we get. It's easier to use this approach for a private company than a public, because how can I insult you? That's what I say. So get a couple of companies by industry, and for a sales organization, pick your top 3, 4, 5 industries, have your marketing as an example, find those top goals. How are they doing financially? And then I can use this to open up a dialogue with you. And people are shocked at how open all of a sudden these private company execs, yeah, our revenues have gone up too, but you told me the average has been 10%. Ours has been 8. What have you seen? What are the better performers doing? It's actually an easier conversation.
Okay. So if we're essentially trying to build rapport through insights about a particular company, or certainly within the industry, you're almost suggesting that we be able to develop a mindset which is much like that of the person that we're speaking to and the position that they hold within the company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think, let's go back to the relationship again. I want to enter into this long-term relationship with you. Mm-hmm. I want to know as much about you as possible. Is it a good fit? Because we know if it's not, that can get expensive. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and buyers want sellers that are going to be partners. They don't want a revolving door. They are not going to have an extra meeting just to meet you. So it's a sense, so we call this adopt the executive mindset, adopt the line of business mindset. So it's essential for you to understand, here's how they make decisions. Here's what they're most focused on. Here's how they're compensated. Because otherwise you're just going in asking. In fact, I was talking to, he's a former VP of supply chain for, which is now the largest retailer in the world, I won't say, but he said, anytime a seller came in and said, hey, Steve, share with me what your goals are, he said, this meeting's over. It was publicly, he said, it's in the public domain. Don't ask me to tell you something you should know. So to answer your question is, you have to get intimate with that person from the perspective of what is top of mind for what they're trying to get accomplished. How are they trying to get that accomplished? And then sharing with them, confirming those are still on the table, then confirming with them, here's how we've helped others in the industry. You have to. Just I don't see how. Well, I think that's why only 60% of enterprise sellers make quota. If you're not inside the mind of the person you're trying to sell to, how can you possibly be effective? I don't think you can.
So along those same lines, you're also suggesting, if I understand this correctly, that you understand not just their goals, but also understand how they're measured on performance. Yeah.
Yeah. There's two parts of that. The highest level, it's their executive compensation. And almost all companies will tell you, in the States, it's called the proxy statement. In Europe, for example, they talk about the governance section in their annual reports. And they'll say, look, okay, Vinay is 30% of his compensated is on sales growth. 20% of his compensation is on gross profit or gross profit margin. X% is on EPS, 10% is on others, diversity, ESG, et cetera. It's all out there in the public domain. And let's face it, I'm not saying we're all coin operated. Being a finance type and a capitalist, more is preferred to less. And so that's what they're going to make decisions focused on these metrics. So if I know that 30% of your compensation is on profitability, Vinay, I'm going to come up to you and say, hey, I know that you're compensated 30% on profitability and 20% on growth. And I know it's schools your kids go to. And that's just creepy to me, but I can make that part of the conversation saying, we want to help you improve your performance in areas like profitability and helping you grow faster. And here's how we've helped others. So now you know that I know. And I always tell folks, in your proposals, talk about those compensation metrics and how you might be able to help them. The strange part, Vinay, is we did a survey. In fact, I did a webinar on executive compensation. And the survey showed that only 10% of sellers consistently use executive compensation as part of their account planning or in conversation with the buyers. It's out there in the public domain. Come on. Now I know I know your goals and strategies, and I know how you're being measured. It's on these three things. So how can I help you do that?
The other issue that comes to mind is that of risk as well as the dynamics within the organization. I think you touched upon the fact that buying committees, if you will, or teams tend to be quite large these days and go across functions within the organization. So how would you help a particular individual navigate those two issues? Because they're also at the back of a person's mind, if not at the forefront.
Yeah. And so a couple of things. In our book, we interviewed this guy, Ken May. He was the CEO of Topgolf. He was, I think, the very high-ranking person at FedEx, ground operations, something like that. Really cool guy. And so I asked him that. He goes, first of all, we do not want a bunch of sellers running amok in the organization. That's not acceptable. But the point was, okay, here I'm currently talking to IT as an example. And I know that one of the things that this company is trying to do is grow the business by getting greater customer insights. I need to go talk to marketing, right? So I have to leverage this relationship. I understand this to be a goal. I know you all are going to be involved, but one of the primary decision maker is marketing. And I'd love to go with you to talk to the CMO or whichever level it's at about how our solutions, and of course, we're going to be partners, right? You're not going to be partners, can help marketing get greater customer insights to grow the top line. And let me tell you how we've done it at other places, because they're not going to use up their political capital all that easily. So you've really got to convince that person. So you need to make that person the hero, help them be a hero. Hey, Bob, I'm bringing Vinay along, and here's what we're trying to get done. They've helped others in the industry. So what happens is leverage those relationships, have a good story, but learn. Now I got to talk like a marketing person. I've been talking to IT my whole life. I don't know how marketing people think. So again, I have to get inside your head. What are your goals? What are your strategies? How do you measure success? Oh, you measure by campaign response rate, let's say. So that I find that to really be the best way to do it. Another way that I've also seen is that we're trying to get to you. You're in marketing. I currently call on IT. And hey, Bob, we have some marketing specialists in our sales organization who would love to talk to Vinay about how we've helped others. If you got some internal expertise, industry expertise, line of business experts there, then go ahead and leverage that, especially if they're same level, like CMO to CMO. That's like the best situation.
So from a risk perspective, you're not just looking at industry-wide risk factors. You're also trying to understand how they perceive risk within the organization and as part of the buying journey. Is that correct as well?
Yes, absolutely. And you can look at industry risk, but to me, the easiest thing to do is all these companies in their annual reports, they are required by most regulatory bodies to say, list the risk. Read it. Yeah. It's real easy. If we don't innovate, for example, if there's supply chain disruptions or those type of things. And so those are also, hey, Vinay, which one of these, and I see a bunch of them, which one of these are really the ones that are bothering you the most? The one that really gets me is retaining talent. Oh, that's driving me nuts right now. Well, let me share with you how we've helped others. But Vinay, what I find is most sales processes, quarterly business reviews, they leave out the risk part. Even if they talk about goals and strategies, which a small percentage do, it's like, what's the risk? The other thing that I tell people all the time is, and a friend of mine in sales told me this, he goes, Stephen, we always show up with a smiley face. We're all happy. But if business is that easy, everyone's stock would be going up 25% a year. Everyone would be growing at double digits a year. So the point I always make is talk about the risk that they're facing. Talk about the risk of your solution, because we all know not 100% of implementations have been successful. Vinay, this is where we screwed up, and don't blame it on the customer. But let me tell you what we've learned from that. So you've got to talk about risk, because businesses, we're always, weighing risk versus return, and hopefully the return's higher. But to leave that out of the conversation, it's just executives are going to think less of you.
Would you say that as part of this conversation, there is a need for transparency? And by transparency, I'm really referring to the values and the bigger purpose behind driving the company, and I guess the focus, which also leads to the focus for the future, so that we ensure that there is a meeting of minds, so to speak, as we go down this whole process and get into the weeds with all the financial details and things of that nature.
It's a relationship, right? We have to have a common relationship. Look, Vinay, my job is to help you achieve your goals and strategies, to help your company be as successful as possible. And hey, here's our goals. Our CFO just announced that our goal is to grow revenue 25% a year, whatever it is. And the only way I can possibly do that, the only way we're going to be successful is if you're successful, because we don't want a bunch of customer churn. I don't want to have to go and get new customers every year. So, you and I are in this together, and I can only be successful if I help you be successful. And I understand this is what you're trying to get done. Here's how we helped others. So drag along. If your customers are successful, you're going to be successful. I know that sounds trivial, but it's true.
As you have these meetings with various folks within an organization, how do you ensure that you're able to inch the conversations forward? Do you come to a conclusion at the end of each meeting with a mutually beneficial outcome? Is that pretty much how you operate? And also I was wondering how that would work in terms of a team effort, because I'm assuming from what you're saying that this is very much in line with what is known as account-based marketing for enterprise sales. So how do those two work together?
Yeah. Especially the deal teams, they're getting bigger. Buying groups are getting larger. So I tell people all the time, do not say, hey, Vinay, so what are next steps? He may say, guess what? I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. I'm going to forget this whole conversation. And so I always like to say that there should be like three takeaways, right? Hey, Vinay, let me confirm that. First of all, what did you find of value in this conversation? Can we pick a couple of those areas that we talked about and delve into those deeper? You're the executive. Love to keep you involved, but he's going to say, work with these folks now. So who can we work with to explore that in more detail? And I'd like to get back to you and if you're an executive, it could be months or weeks or whatever, but have some very clear ideas of what are a couple areas you want to focus on. Now, as you get into the meeting, that's going to change, right? Like I remember the one time I was working with a customer in a grocery store, and we just knew they were going to be focused on cost. We just knew it because we knew everything, right? And we were fortunate enough to get to talk to their new CEO. There's all these high-ranking folks were there. But we just knew they were going to talk about cost. We were all ready to talk about next steps around cost. And so I was fortunate. I get to talk to the CEO. And I said, Vinay, so let me ask you, what are the couple areas we talked about what you're trying to get done? We've showed our capabilities. What are the couple of areas we can explore with your team and get back to you in a month or so? And we just knew it was going to be cost. We just knew it. And he goes, revenues. And I said, and now I want to hand over to my esteemed colleagues. So the point being is go in with a plan, obviously, but be ready to change that, because one of the things I cannot stand is when we're on a number of our customer sales calls as they're going through this transformation. And just like in our case, we were obsessed with cost. I just cannot stand it when people are convinced this is the solution that's going to help them with this. And then all of a sudden they say, we just signed off on a deal. We just signed up Salesforce or whatever it might be. So you got to be flexible, which I think good sellers are great at that. And buying executives appreciate that. But I found a lot of sellers, man, they're just locked into their speech, and by God, that's what we're going to talk about.
With this idea of being able to speak to people, certainly at an ABM level, I get the sense that as you're having these conversations, you're also evolving your industry playbook, or developing one if you haven't done that. Could you tell us more about how that works?
This is really interesting. Probably about a month or so ago, I did a webinar with a very senior sales enablement leader. We talked about creating a playbook, and I can send you the link to the recording. And so we did a survey, and we said, how would you rate your industry playbook? About 5% said excellent. It was like 60 or 70% said making progress. And Vinay, 20%, what playbook? Oh, it's crazy. But, and it's hard. It's a lot of efforts. It's a team effort, but it's so scalable, because once you got that playbook, obviously you got to change. I can get ready to go talk to you, especially the private companies you mentioned earlier. So to me, there's a number of steps. And the number one step is find out what the goals and strategies are in the industry. So look at individual companies. You got analyst reports that talk about that stuff, right? So first part is like big picture, what are they trying to get done? The second part I like to talk about is what are they referring to in terms of business trends, technology trends, the risks that we talked about earlier. And then I'll look at those trends and say, how can I help them? People doing more in terms of digitalization. How does our solution help them accelerate that, as an example, right? Or here's one that we hadn't even thought about. let's bring our team together and say, can we help them address this risk? So you've got to understand the environment in which they operate, which is business trends, technology trends, and risk. The other part is, how's the industry doing financially, right? Are revenues going up? Is profitability going down? If you look at a lot of what I call product companies now, what you find is their cost to goods sold, right? Their material cost, labor cost, overhead as a percentage of revenues is going up. Shortage of labor, material cost is going up. They can pass some of that along. But so now I know that, wow, one of the things that's really an issue in this company is those costs are going up. How can we help them with that? So, and not all the metrics. And I tell people this all the time, pick 2, maybe 3 of all those financial metrics. Which ones can you impact? Get your house story down, which then leads us into the next part that says, okay, let's use my cost of goods sold example. We see cost of goods sold is going up, right? Their direct costs are going up. We happen to sell automation, manufacturing automation. Oh, within cost of goods sold, which one of those 3 key drivers, materials, labor, overhead, can we help with? Oh, we really can't do anything about materials because we don't buy for them, but we can certainly help them with labor productivity. We can certainly help them with maintenance, which is included in labor overhead. So start breaking it down into high-level financial metrics, pick a 2, 3 operational KPIs and talk about those. For example, I was on a call with a company that provides logistics services. And I said, listen, what is the one area you can help them with? They said, inventory. I said, okay, within inventory, what's the one area you can help them with? Because we're more dependable, we have greater visibility, we can help with safety stock. I said, hey, let's talk about safety stock. Let's not worry about all the other stuff. Because Vinay, it's a journey. You can't say, here's 5 things we do. Hey, Salesforce, go figure this all out. No, pick 1 or 2. It's like any sports. Learn how to putt before you can drive, although I never learned how to do any of those. So now it's, which are the metrics? Create value statements. Tell me the how and then the how much. I learned that from years ago. I was very fortunate to work with Tom Shoei at Walmart, who's our CFO. And even though we were both finance guys, right? He'd say, Steven, tell me how this is going to work and then how much. So the next part is, now we know what they're trying to get done, what's going on risk-wise, what's going on financially, how we can help them financially that's going to help them achieve their goals. Come up with some non-technical how stories. Well, we can help you reduce waste because what we can do is on a real-time basis, monitor the quality of the products or the materials that are being consumed. Don't get into, we got these sensors and it goes up to the cloud and it goes to this analytic, data lake and that kind of stuff. And then you do get into the how much. And that's what's really powerful is we typically can improve labor 5 to 10%. And Vinay, for a company your size, it'd be worth this. Can't promise it. So is it involved? It is. Have I seen people get high returns on it? Yes, because now I can get inside your head. Here's what production's thinking about. Here's what distribution logistics is thinking about. So is it a lot of work? It is. I'm not gonna make up a story. But the other thing I want to highlight, it's a team effort. It's not just, hey, sellers, go figure this out. Hey, sales enablement, go figure it out. It's a team effort.
So we've certainly looked at being able to provide value and understanding the mindset of your potential customers. Is there more to know and understand and execute on as we go from value proposition to making a valid business case? Yeah.
And the one, I'm talking more the quantitative piece. I guess goals are qualitative, but hey, Vinay, we cannot leave out, I'm a buying executive. What am I trying to get done here? Yeah. I'm going to read, let me give you an example. The average tenure of a CMO is 3 years. So if I'm talking to someone who's two years into it, I can't forecast the future, but I doubt if he or she is going to make this long-term investment. Hey, I need some short-term results now, or you're going to retire. Or what you find with a lot of financial types is I know the one company, one of the CFOs took over sales. So what we can't leave out is, what are you trying to get at? What are you personally, what's on your personal agenda? What makes you happy? So don't leave that part out. But having said that, is that once we've talked about the value prop, here's how we can, potentially help you in those type of things. So a business case, a really good business case, first of all, is not just a check the box. I like to call it a business plan. But what happens is people do business cases, they get put on the shelves, and the implementation team comes in. A lot of times what I've seen, they don't even know what we said the goals were going to be. All they know, they're supposed to go in there and implement this cloud solution. Story for another day. So very high level, like we talked about before, how's it align with your goals and strategies? I have to address the initiatives of the individual lines of businesses, talk about the risk and how we're going to mitigate risk, include the traditional financial analysis, ROI, payback, but don't forget the executive comp, because by the time you come up with ROI and payback and net present value, all those classic ones, you have enough information to convert it into, let's say you're bonused on earnings per share, to put in earnings per share. And the other part is, don't forget about, okay, Vinay, how are you and I going to meet quarterly to talk about the success of the program? It's all about customer success. And we talk about value selling, but it should also be value selling, value realization. So those are the components. Here's the tricky part. In the book, we talked to Steve Clancy, who's the CIO at Georgia Pacific. One of the things he said is, I wish these sellers would just make my life easier. And I said, Steve, what are you talking about? He goes, look, they come in, they got a great solution. There's no question about it. He goes, and I want to buy it because they're giving me this 30-slide PowerPoint deck. He goes, and if I think it's good enough, I got to go socialize it with my colleagues. He goes, so I'll spend all this time boiling it down to one page. So once you've done all this analysis, you got all the backup work, Vinay, get it on one page that your sponsor or a line of business buyer can look at and say, yeah, this is something that we want to go forward with. And if they want to see all the details, here it is. Here's all the details. Get on one page. But most of these things, in fact, who was it? Oh, maybe it was this Ken May guy again. He goes, if a seller comes in with a 30-slide PowerPoint, he goes, one of two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to catch up on my sleep or the meeting's going to end real soon. So you get down to that one page. It's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah. But yes, I've heard that same comment or similar comments being made all the time. I completely concur with that one. This has been brilliant. I'm also curious. In your book, you mentioned the power of one.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So here's what the power of one is. And I wish I could trademark it, but there was a movie called Power of One, and all. I think George Clooney has a charity called Power of One. So here's what the power of one is. So let me give you the scenario. As we mentioned earlier, much earlier on in the sales process, I have to start giving these buyers some vision of value, financial benefit. I don't have 3 months to do this anymore. I got to do this like real quick. So what the power of one is, it says, okay, take a financial metric. What if you can improve that by 1%? Or that example that I gave you earlier about, I sell automation solutions, take labor, right? And initially you don't know what their labor costs are. So I can say, I know what their revenues are. I know what labor is in this industry on average as a percentage of revenues. So what would a 1% improvement be for this company? Okay. So it's just a conversation starter. And the way that you can use this is I've confirmed with you, Vinay, that I'm trying to improve profitability by improving operational efficiencies within manufacturing. One of the areas I'm trying to do is improve labor productivity. Okay. Now I know that story. Oh, here's how we've helped others in your industry improve labor productivity. And Vinay, for a company your size, using some industry averages, we estimate each 1% improvement's worth $10 million. How's that compare to your own internal analysis? Which leads me to my next thought. Companies do this. Huge retailer I was lucky to get to work with, they would say, what is a 1-day improvement in days in inventory worth? And at that time, it was like 400 something million. How many stores could we build? I was working in another company that manufactures paper products. They were always saying, what if we can squeeze 1% more yield off of those machines? So what happens is companies do this kind of thing internally because the easy stuff's gone, right? Easy stuff's gone. So what they do, even if they don't know how they're going to do it, they say, how could we 1 day of inventory is $400 million. How can we do that? Okay, get the team together. Let's brainstorm around that. So in the sales world, one, they're already doing it. Two, that example I just gave you, Vinay, we estimate for a company your size, using some industry average, each 1% of improvement in labor is worth 10 million. How's that compare to your own internal analysis? And by then, you've earned the right to ask that question. You may say, the most common response, Vinay, is it's close enough. Let's go with the 10 million. Now what I get to do is say, that's in the details, which typically aren't in the public domain. What's your goal? What are you trying to get done? Oh, that darn CFO just told me to cut that by 5%. If I know 1% is 10, 5%'s got to be 50.
Yeah.
So I understand this, Vinay. Your goal is to improve labor productivity by 50 million. Yeah, you're right. Let me share with you how we've helped others. So it's a great conversation starters. Most people don't do it because either they're afraid of doing it, they don't know to do it, but that's how these companies think internally. And it doesn't matter. The number's never going to be correct. You may say, Stephen, that's way low. Ours is 15 or 20. Oh, okay. What's your goal around that? What are your initiatives for improving that? Let me share how we've helped others. This also allows you to do, let's say the number is 50 million total. If I can get them half of that, they're going to listen to me. I'm going to get invited to the CFO's family reunion, probably. If I can capture a couple million of that, go back, open the aperture. How can we, and there's no magic numbers at 25s, at 50, I don't know. But what it allows you to do is put your solution in perspective. If they're looking for 50 and you can accomplish 1 or 2 million, somebody might be interested, but it's not going to be the senior level. So it's a great, and it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. It's just that very few people use it.
I'm also wondering, as you're sharing these perspectives and stories and solutions of how you've helped other companies, have you used existing customers to come and share their stories as well as part of the narrative?
Yeah. So we've got, it's so hard to get quotes, but they will allow us to share studies, but they won't say, and this is such and such company. Although a couple, Cisco, for example, the one guy that was running their sales enablement, he was Gordon Gazzarano. He did a 2-minute, hey, you need to be using this. Here's how it's helped us. They make it easy. They're fun to work with. But we do capture results. So for example, one of the results that with one of our customers, a pretty extensive deployment, is they found that with the education and what we're providing also some of the education, but with our tool, what we call Client IQ, the customer insights, that 80% of their buyers deal size were 20% higher. So I drink my own Kool-Aid. Because we can model all this stuff, I'll say, Vinay, 80% of buyers had 20% higher deal size. Hey, let's say that we deploy this to half of your sellers, right? And let's not use 20%. I believe the number. Let's call it 10%. This is a couple $100 million. And here's what your investment's going to need to be. Yeah, I'm being a finance type. I like the numbers. You got to put it in perspective. It just can't be thrown out a bunch of numbers.
So just trying to summarize that, use case studies or customer stories, if you will, and in order to bring a bit of social proof and credibility to your perspectives. Yeah,
we have to. We tell clients all the time, if you can't give me a use case, or a case study, that's what executives want to hear first. Don't go in there. I tell them all the time, we can give you a 500% ROI solution. You don't know that, but you can at least tell them what are the different customer stories we have. Even if you can't use the customer's name, that's okay. Yeah. It's better when you can. I wish we could do it all the time, but I think some of our customers are paranoid about their competitors finding out about us. But it's the how, and then how much. Remember what Tom Showy said. So of course.
This has been terrific, Stephen. Is there an aspect or aspects to the kind of process and perspective that you're helping companies with that perhaps doesn't get much airtime or we need to highlight because we haven't quite touched upon it as yet?
Yeah. Are you talking about FinListics or help me out? Yeah. It isn't talked about enough. And I think and I'm talking about FinListics, right? But I think it's the responsibility of sales enablement and sales leaders, who I think generally are not doing a good job. In fact, are you a soccer fan?
I do follow the soccer. Yeah.
Do you recognize these cards? Thrown out, you're good. So I'm doing this all the time to sales enablement, sales. Listen, I'm giving you a warning. Don't put all the burden on these frontline sellers. So the point is that they have got to get involved in this conversation. They're the ones that have got to make the commitment. And we provide a lot of information around that. So one of the things that we do is actually on a monthly basis or twice a month now, we provide these webinars where I bring executives in. Don't listen to me. I think I got a lot to say, but here's an executive telling you what they think from a marketing perspective or supply chain perspective or sales leader perspective. So one, go out to our website, go to the resource page. A lot of what we talked about, Vinay, is there. So FinListics.com resource. We're not going to torture you with, okay, call you up. Hey, Vinay, I saw you. Let me sell you something. That isn't our style. So a lot of resources there. LinkedIn, follow us on LinkedIn, FinListics.com on LinkedIn. And we're always pushing things out there. And I think part of it is there's still that profess for me that knowledge should be free. So we're doing these webinars. We're doing all kinds of papers in that to help you to see it. In fact, what I want to do for your listeners, Vinay, is if they reach out to us at info@finlistics.com, please tell us that you're listening to Predictable B2B Success, right? And what we'll send you is chapter 1, which we call Executive Insights from our book, Insight-Led Selling. So we provide a lot of information that helps people see the benefits of this. And do we want them to reach out to us? Of course we do, but we're not the pushy company. I can tell you that.
And just for listeners, Stephen's book, which he co-authored, is called Insight-Led Selling, Adopt an Executive Mindset, Build Credibility, Communicate with Impact. I'm assuming that they can get it off Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and things of that nature.
Yeah. Amazon. In fact, it's an Amazon bestseller. So it was published in 2020. I said, the one good thing that came out of 2020 is my colleague, Melody Ashley, who's our chief revenue officer, and I wrote the book. And we said, look, let's turn this into something good. Gets out there, took off. I don't know how many copies my mom bought, but anyway, became an Amazon bestseller. So we're having a great time. Yep. But yeah, out on Amazon, the ebook, the audio book's out now, paperback, however version you want.
Is there something that businesses something that you feel businesses should know about sales folk? If so, what would that be?
Are you talking about the sales leaders and like sales enablement?
Yeah. Sales leaders within an organization. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a couple of things is that they want to be successful, but they can't do everything. Okay. Go research your customer and create an industry playbook and follow up. In fact, I was talking to Justin Hahnemann, who was at GP at the time. He's now at AWS running their consumer products. And he said he's just absolutely amazed at what percentage of sellers don't follow up. So my recommendation is through, for example, automation, through, for example, your own practices, encourage them to do the right things, make their lives easier. So they've got that extra time to follow up. They've got that extra time to say, what are my company goals and strategies? Because I don't want to sound overly critical, but I think in these sales organizations, there's a lot of check the box stuff. And I don't think that there is as much support. Again, now I'm throwing this one on sales enablement and marketing, but there's not enough support to say, all right, you went through the training. Now, how do we continue with the nourishment? How do you interact with each other? So my point would be is give folks the time, feed them the insights. They should not have to go dig for it. They shouldn't have to dig through your LMS to find these insights. It should make it a lot easier because they want to be successful. And if they're successful, you're going to be successful. So my point is, I think that people should be more conscious of really what these sellers are up to. And I know a lot of sales leaders have gone through the same thing, but there's so many tools you can leverage nowadays that give them those insights more quickly, gives them more time to think about what to do with it, but that getting that constant reinforcement from the sales leaders and sales enablement.
Terrific. And what about the reverse? So, what should sellers know about? What should buyers know about sellers?
I know what they think about most of them right now, and it's not positive.
Yeah.
So I can tell you what they want. They want them to help solve problems. They want them to know their business. But I think from the buyer's perspective is that a good seller wants to be a partner. So just as that seller, and I talk about going back to the relationship, just as that seller has got to put time into building that relationship, these buying executives, they're busy. But man, if they can find a much smaller group to buy from, that rationalization that's going on, it is going to make their life easier. It is going to make them more successful. So take the time to share with them. Here's our high level goals. Let me break that down for you. Tell them things that is not in the public domain. Obviously, don't give anything away that's confidential. So help them understand. Here's the 3 or 4 things I'm really trying to do. Here's the one thing we've tried for 5 years and it doesn't work. So there has to be that open relationship. It cannot be one way, because if it is, you can't help that seller be successful. Candy Conway is an example. Was the senior VP of global operations of AT&T. Not a bad job. Mm-hmm. And that's what she talks about in the book. I have got to open up, share with the seller what I'm up to, what has changed since our last investor presentation. And that's what she talks about, is making the seller successful. And it's like a marriage or a partnership, whatever you want to call it. We're both trying to make each other successful. And then 2 + 2 really is 5.
Stephen, if listeners were listening to this episode, and if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
Number 1, know your customer. Fall in love with your customer. The second thing would be fall in love with the customer's industry, because they expect you to know their industry, not be like an industry expert. And in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine about that, and him and I are both car nuts. And he goes, we would be great salespeople in the automotive industry. We could sell into the automotive industry because we love it.
Yeah.
And that's my point. It's fall in love with the industry, right? Read about what the CEOs are talking about. Look at the different financial press and they're focused on ESG, or they're getting all kinds of issues around that. Fall in love with the industry, love the industry. And that may sound crazy, but I don't care whatever industry it is. Like back in my younger days, I loved utilities. I thought they were cool. I wasn't a nuclear engineer. I just thought they were cool. And then the third part is how they're performing financially, how your solutions help them, and by how much. So those would be my three key takeaways.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. I think this has been terrific in terms of helping listeners, hopefully, create remarkable experiences. And by that, I'm referring to remark-worthy experiences with their clients. So thank you for this. Much, much appreciated. I know we kept things at a fairly high-level perspective, but hopefully it's given people enough food for thought to perhaps read the book or reach out to have more conversations. Stephen, thank you.
Yeah. And Vinay, thank you so much. And I know everyone out there is very busy. So please, thank you for your time. Hope you got a good return on it. And Vinay, you're right. The book, and we're not making money off the book. But anyway, it's more of a blueprint. Each one of these topics we talked about goes into more detail. And of course, if you want more information, please reach out to us at info@finlistics.com. But thanks everyone. Vinay, so gracious to have me on. Thank you.